The small town of Briarwood sat cradled by dense forests, the kind where the trees grew so thick they seemed to breathe. Folks in Briarwood kept to their routines: coffee at the diner, church on Sundays, lights out by 10, but there was a quiet understanding, almost a superstition, that no one lingered near the woods after dark. The Hollow, as they called it, wasn't just a patch of wilderness. It was the place where strange sounds drifted through the trees, where shadows seemed thicker, and where the air itself felt heavy, as if the ground was trying to remember something it couldn't quite forget. Lila Grant, a 29-year-old high school history teacher, had always dismissed the old tales. Urban legends are just fairy tales for adults, she'd say, flipping through textbooks that spoke of revolutions and wars, not whispered warnings. But lately, the woods had been calling to her in strange ways. Quiet knocks on her window at night, a faint tapping like fingernails on glass, and once, a voice, soft, breathy, almost pleading, "Lila, come back." She told herself it was stress, an overactive imagination, the residue of too many late nights grading papers. That evening, as dusk settled in with a heavy sigh, Lila took the long way home from school. Her car rumbled past the Hollow, headlights cutting across the darkening trees. She slowed, her gaze drawn to a figure standing just beyond the tree line. A girl, maybe 16, with tangled blonde hair and a pale dress that fluttered in the wind. Lila's breath hitched. The girl lifted a hand, as if beckoning, and Lila felt an inexplicable pull, like her bones were tethered to that outstretched arm. Shaking it off, she pressed the gas, the car roaring forward, but when she glanced in the rearview mirror, the girl was gone. That night, sleep came in fits and starts. She dreamed of branches scraping across her skin, of voices whispering secrets she couldn't quite catch. When she woke, her wrists ached, as if they'd been bound, and a faint, earthy scent lingered in her room. The next morning, Lila sat at her kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in her hands. "You've been sleepwalking again, haven't you?" her friend Mara asked when she called, her voice edged with concern. Lila hesitated, then whispered, "No, it's something else. There was a girl. I saw her by the Hollow." Mara fell silent, the weight of her pause louder than words. "Lila," Mara finally said, her voice tight, "don't go back there. You know what they say." Lila's hands trembled as she gripped the phone tighter. "But I have to know. I have to understand what's happening to me." And as the wind rattled the window panes, she heard it again, softer this time, barely a whisper. "Come back." The days blurred after that. Lila felt herself moving through them like a ghost, drifting from classroom to car to the lonely quiet of her home. Her students' faces blurred, their questions ringing hollow in her ears, and her sleep, what little she had, was fractured by the same dream. The girl in the white dress standing in the Hollow, her hands outstretched, her face half hidden in shadows. The whispers grew louder with each night, filling the corners of Lila's mind like smoke curling under a door. "Come back. Come back." One evening, as twilight painted the sky in bruised shades of purple and gray, Lila stood at the edge of the Hollow. The branches shifted overhead, creaking like old bones, and the smell of damp leaves and something older, something sour, wrapped around her like a cold hand. She stepped forward, crunching dead twigs underfoot, her breath catching in her throat. The air grew thicker, her ears filled with a low hum, and the trees seemed to lean in closer, as if listening. "Lila." She froze. The voice was right behind her, warm and close enough to stir the hairs on her neck. She turned, but there was no one there. Only a small shape on the ground, half buried in the leaves. Her hands shook as she brushed the dirt away. A locket, tarnished and cracked, its chain tangled with bits of moss. She pried it open, revealing a faded photo inside. A girl, maybe 16, with tangled blonde hair and a pale dress, smiling in a way that sent a shiver down Lila's spine. Back home, she sat on her bed, staring at the locket, her fingers tracing the worn edges. A name was etched faintly inside, Clara Bell. The name stirred something deep in her memory, an old local legend about a girl who vanished in the hollow nearly 50 years ago. She was never found, Mara had once whispered during a childhood sleepover, her face pale in the glow of a flashlight. Some say she still wanders there, looking for someone to take her place. Lila's phone buzzed. It was a text from Mara. "Please, Lila, stay away from the hollow. Don't let it in." Lila stared at the words, a cold sweat breaking across her skin. She thought about the dreams, the girl, the voice. It wasn't just a story. The hollow was calling her, and it wasn't finished yet. That night, Lila dreamt of a clearing in the woods, a ring of stones etched with strange symbols. The girl in white stood in the center, her eyes hollow and dark as an open grave. She raised her hand, and Lila felt her own body move against her will, stepping forward, drawn into the circle. When Lila awoke, there was dirt under her fingernails and a smear of mud across her cheek. Her heart pounded, her breath ragged, as she stared at the locket still clutched in her hand. The hollow wasn't just whispering, it was pulling her in. Lila stood at the threshold of the hollow, the pale light of dawn catching in the sharp angles of the branches, casting spidery shadows across her skin. The locket's weight in her pocket seemed heavier than it should be, as though the memory it held was sinking deeper into her bones. Her breath clouded in the cold morning air, and each step forward felt like it echoed, not in the woods, but somewhere deeper, somewhere she couldn't quite see. Her hands trembled as she reached out to steady herself against a gnarled trunk, its bark damp and almost warm, like the skin of a living thing. Behind her, a voice called out sharp and clear, "Lila, don't!" Mara's voice sliced through the haze, laced with fear. She stood at the edge of the road, her car idling behind her, its headlights a pale blur in the mist. Lila turned, her pulse leaping, but something in her eyes must have frightened Mara, because she stopped short, arms crossed tight over her chest. "You look like her," Mara whispered, "like Clara, the day before she disappeared." Lila tried to answer, but her throat felt dry, her voice swallowed by the thick, pulsing quiet of the hollow. The trees around her seemed to vibrate, humming low and deep, and when she looked down, she saw roots curling out from the ground, tangled, reaching, almost grasping. A cold dread settled in her gut, but it didn't stop her feet from moving forward, as if the earth itself was tugging her in. She reached the clearing from her dream, the ring of stones etched with those strange twisting symbols, half buried beneath moss and rot. In the center, the air shimmered, and the girl stood there, Clara, her pale dress fluttering in an unfelt wind, her eyes dark and endless. "You came back?" Clara whispered, her voice softer now, almost sad. "You have to help me." Lila's voice cracked as she spoke, her breath catching. "What happened to you, Clara?" Clara's face twisted, a flicker of pain crossing her features. "They bound me here. They took what I knew, buried it beneath the roots. I can't leave until someone takes it back." Her gaze locked on Lila's, and her voice deepened, urgent. "You have to remember." Suddenly, the ground beneath Lila's feet shifted and she fell, her body sinking into the earth, as if the hollow itself had swallowed her. Roots wrapped around her wrists and ankles, cold and wet, pulling her deeper into the dark. Panic rose in her throat. But then she heard it. The whispers, hundreds of them, all calling her name in that soft, haunting tone. And then, a memory, sharp as glass, a childhood walk near the hollow. Her mother's voice tight with fear. "Never step past the stones, Lila. Never." She hadn't remembered that until now. As the roots pulled tighter, she realized the hollow didn't just feed on memories. It erased them, swallowed them whole. And now, it wanted hers. Lila's breath came in ragged gasps as the earth pressed in, the damp scent of rot and old leaves filling her nose. The roots clung tighter, curling around her ribs, squeezing until her vision blurred. She fought to remember her mother's voice, the smell of coffee in the mornings, the way the sun felt on her skin. Each memory flickered like a candle in a storm, threatening to be snuffed out. The whispers grew louder, insistent, like a chorus of voices rising in a funeral dirge.
"Give it up. Forget. Stay."
"No!" she choked, struggling against the pull. Her fingers brushed the locket in her pocket, and she felt a sudden surge, like static electricity crackling in her veins. She gripped it tight, the metal warm, almost pulsing, and the whispers faltered, as if uncertain. Clara's voice drifted through the dark, softer this time, pleading. But Lila understood now. Clara wasn't just a victim. She was a warning, a reflection of what the hollow did to those who lost themselves in it. She was what happened when you forgot who you were. The locket wasn't just a trinket. It was a key, a fragment of memory left behind to tether Clara to the world. And now it was Lila's anchor too. With a desperate cry, Lila slammed the locket against a jagged root. It cracked open, light spilling out in a burst that seared her skin. The roots recoiled, hissing, and the earth seemed to breathe, exhaling a long, shuddering sigh. Lila felt herself rising, the ground giving way beneath her. She gasped as she broke through the surface, coughing up dirt and shaking as the hollow's grip loosened. The clearing was still, the air heavy, but no longer suffocating. Clara stood across from her, no longer pale and hollow-eyed, but young, vibrant and almost glowing. Tears welled in Lila's eyes as she whispered, "I'm sorry." Clara smiled faintly, a bittersweet curve of her lips. "You remembered," she said softly, her voice echoing like a distant bell. And then she faded, dissolving into the golden shafts of sunlight breaking through the trees. Mira rushed forward, pulling Lila into a fierce hug. "I thought I lost you," she sobbed, her hands trembling. Lila held tight, the locket warm in her palm, its photo now blank, the weight of it lighter somehow. She looked past Mara into the hollow, and though the shadows still stirred, they no longer seemed to watch. The air felt lighter, freer, as if some ancient burden had been lifted. Lila knew she'd never forget the darkness that lurked beneath the roots, the hunger of the hollow, but she also knew she wouldn't be swallowed by it. Not now, not ever again. If you felt the pull of the hollow tonight, there's more waiting just beyond the trees. Like this video if the whisper sent the chill down your spine. And tell us in the comments, what secrets do you think lie buried in the darkest corners of your own hometown? Subscribe for more stories that linger long after the last word. And remember, until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and don't get carried away by their whispers.